So the first thing I have to do is start with a massive disclaimer. Proceed at your own risk. Nothing on this video constitutes advice and is for entertainment purposes only. My instructions were the instructions for me to follow. Do your due diligence if you're going to undertake this job. This is just my experience. For example, for the 899, the swing arm pivot pins use a 12-point star bit instead of an Allen key, so there may well be very many things that are different for your bike. Check the torque settings. It's entirely your responsibility to make sure you've got this right for you. This is simply cataloguing what I did. Good luck. Okay, so this is going to be another of my semi-random rambling videos, so I apologise for that. I've vaguely got notes, so hopefully it'll make things a little bit more succinct. So obviously I'm recording this after I finish the job, and it's things that I probably should have done, looked at or considered before starting. The first thing is just simply in terms of tools. You're going to need several torque wrenches. You're going to need a really big fat torque wrench that's capable of 230 Newton meters to do the rear wheel nut rather. And you're going to need to put 100 Newton meters on the swing arm pivot pins themselves, and then all the way down to some of the bolts here that are simply 8 or 10 Newton meters. So you're going to need a really wide range. I use 3: a small hand torque wrench that will do up to about I think up to about 15 or 20, then a large one that does up to about 60, and then the largest one that does from 60 to 300. So yeah, you'll need several sets of Allen keys to do this job. I've got one set that's of these sort of T-style keys that were really useful. I have 2 more sets that are of the sort of typical angle style Allen keys. I also have a set that are like screwdrivers. And then in there, I can't be bothered, there's a whole rail of sockets, Allen sockets. You're going to need to use pretty much all of them at some point in the job. The T-bolts can do most of them. Getting at the fairing, I find the screwdriver style were easier, and also for some of the ones around here, the screwdriver style were easier. Yeah, the fairing, I said about those. Yes, getting at I knew there was a point to something. Getting at the pinch bolts. There are pinch bolts on the foot pegs that attach to the swing arm pivot pins. Those I needed to use the little L style ones to get in at. Luckily they weren't overly torqued, so I was able to get them undone, but there's not a lot of room to get in there unless you're going to start taking the whole thing apart, which really, you know, who wants to do that? So yeah, you'll need a huge set of array of different Allen keys just to make your life easier. They don't have to be expensive, but you're going to need them. The other thing you're going to need is really long Allen keys. So I think it was 10mm to get in to the swing arm pivot pins. Oh, I'm in the way, aren't I? There we go. A huge one to get in there. And when you're setting up the swing arm itself, you'll have it off the bike. You're going to need a long one in order to reach in to do the suspension linkage, and you might find that the bolt doesn't want to come out because you just get loads of cack in there and it's greasy, and it should just slide out, but it's probably dirty and grimy and it won't want to. So be prepared to have to spray in a load of WD-40 or brake cleaner or some kind of degreaser in order to clean it up enough to extract that bolt. And it should just be able to come out using sort of just the friction of the Allen key, I suppose, itself. What else? Have a buttload of brake fluid and clutch, brake fluid or brake or clutch fluid, your DOT4 basically, and also brake cleaner. I use loads of brake cleaner, just paranoia, first partly for degreasing, and also anything that ever touched anything remotely brake fluidy or clutch fluidy, when bleeding, stuff just got sprayed and cleaned, and yeah, you can't be too careful with that because you don't want to ruin your paintwork. Let me have a look at my notes here. Yeah, contrary to what I say in the video, you are going to need to break the chain in order to remove the existing swing arm, which means you then have some choices depending on the swing arm itself that you get. So let's jump to that. So if you get a V2 swing arm, everything is the same. Get all the V2 stuff bolted on. You don't really need to think about anything. The sprockets and the chains are all the same. The teeth and the ratios are the same. You can use all the V2 stuff. What is different? The V2 and the 1299, 1199, the larger bikes, the 1199 and the 1299, I believe have a larger hub. That means you can't use a V2 wheel if you get an older swing arm. Well, if you have the older hub. If you have a V2 swing arm and hub, it means you can't use the earlier wheels. Now, I went for a 1299 swing arm for two reasons. One, the V2s were very hard to get hold of at the time when I was looking. Secondly, it meant that I can use, here we go, the 1199 wheel. So this is exactly the same style as the front one, and I wanted them to look the same. That brings up some other choices, so yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. If you get 1299 swing arm, you are then faced with some choices. It's not a problem, it's all easy to do, but it just means you have to make some decisions. That if you are getting an 1199 or 1299 wheel, it's going to be a 6-inch rim instead of a 5.5 inch rim, which means that you can't use a 180 tyre, which is what the 959 tyres are. The original ones are 180/60 17s, and the 1299, 1199, they are 200 17s, and I use a 200. So I went for, so you're basically faced with a choice. You can use a 190 or a 200. I figured a 190 is closer to what's stock, and will create the least impact on what's going on. I already had Bridgestone tyres on my bike, so I was getting a rear Bridgestone for it. That, according to the Bridgestone website, has just a 1mm different outer diameter, so basically a half a millimeter in terms of actual rubber on either side, which is negligible. I mean, you're not even going to notice that. So I used a 190/55/17 on my rear, using an 1199 wheel. I hope this is making sense to people. What else did I make in my notes? Yeah, you're then faced with a choice about this chain and sprockets. So if you use the V2, it's fine, don't need to think about this bit. But if you're still going to need a new chain no matter what. If you're replacing the chain, you ought to replace the sprockets. It's good practice. You don't have to, but it is good practice to do so. If you get a 1299 or 1199 swing arm, you're going to have to change something. They use 525 chains, and the standard, the 959, is a 520. So you're then faced with a choice of whether to go with the 1299 spec or the 959. I figured this is a 959 bike. Everything else about it is pretty much 959 power and all of that. So I'd stay with the same number of teeth and ratios and keep it as a 520 chain. So it is a 1543. So I've got a Renthal sort of quick release rear hub that they made for the 1299. It makes it a bit easier to change the sprocket if I ever have to do so in future. And it was also, at the time that I was looking, it was the only way I could get a rear sprocket that had 43 teeth to keep the ratios the same as the original. I think it's 39 on the back and possibly even 13 on the front, or something like that. But it's very different teeth ratios. So you're just faced with the choice of whether to keep it the 959 520 and the ratios, or whether to go with the 1299 525 and the ratios. I stuck with 959, so it's a 1543 and a 520 chain. That's all of that. Was there anything else I needed to say? Yes, there really was. So basically, I'd sent my wheel off to get resprayed, and thought I'm just going to start. So that meant I didn't have the front wheel in a chock. I've got a proper chock to mount it to keep the bike much more stable and steady. I should have done that before taking the wheel off. So absolutely get a proper chock for the front wheel, use it. And then do so much more on the bike while the rear wheel is still on. I was basically expecting getting the wheel back and then starting the job. and I just got sort of, you know, screw it, I'm going to go for it. In my instructions to myself, almost everything I've done out of order. It should all have been done with the rear wheel on the floor, especially braking the front sprocket. It's 50 Newton meters. You're going to need access to the rear brake. You want the rear wheel on the ground in order to release the sprocket, because you need access to. You don't want the chain to move. You want it to be solid. Otherwise, you're going to need an impact wrench, which luckily I did. You're probably going to need one going forwards. Removing that nut is an absolute pig. Getting it on is hard, but you can at least do it up. Undoing it, I've not successfully undone it without the impact wrench. It's 230 Newton meters, and it's difficult to undo. So yeah, you want to undo the swing arm pivot bolts, the suspension linkage, the rear wheel, the front socket. Basically everything in the instructions is undo everything before taking the wheel off, even, so that you've got the solidity of the bike on the ground, nothing's moving, you can keep that rear wheel solid. I sort of didn't have the wheel, and then I also got out of order, and that is something else, is I got out of sequence. Don't get out of sequence. I've made my instructions in order, so everything is done, so you have them as little time as possible doing work while the bike is up, suspended on the contraption, whatever it is, whether you go for a ladder, or if you have an engine hoist, or whatever you do to keep the rear end suspended, you want it up there for as little time as possible. So do everything pretty much before you even take the rear wheel off. Undo all the bolts, get everything broken. Obviously don't take them off necessarily, depending on what they are, but at least break the torque on them, so you're not having to use anything with high torque when this is suspended in the air. You don't want to do that. I just got really carried away. I should have removed the ABS and brake lines before taking anything off, but I forgot. Yeah, I just stopped following my own instructions like an idiot. What else? Consider loosening the wrist. It's over the other side of the bike, so I can't show you. There's a sort of suspension bracket. You have the shock absorber and a bracket, and then the linkage. Consider loosening some of the other bolts to make it easier to get the linkage in and out. It's easy enough to get, easy-ish enough to get it out, bit of force, but getting it back in was a bit difficult. But I haven't done that, so proceed at your own risk. Do your research. Be sure that it's not going to cause havoc with that. You're dealing with a shock absorber and a spring. I don't even want to touch that. That's why I didn't undo it. It's potentially extremely dangerous, so I undid as little as humanly possible. But loosening them a bit would make it easier to get that linkage in and then get the bolt through it. You can see me struggling on it in about 20 minutes time. Personally, I'd do the struggle, but it's your call. What else did I have? Clutch slave cylinder. When you undo the clutch off the side of the bike, there's a plastic sort of seal that moves in and out. That will pop out if you're not careful. I ended up using a small woodworking clamp to hold it in place. If it comes out, you're probably going to lose some fluid as well, so you're better off if you hold it in place. I struggled getting the front sprocket cover off. You can have an easier time if you remove more stuff with the gear linkage and stuff like that. I didn't want to. It would have been easier getting that cover in and out if I had. Your choice as to whether you want to struggle with the cover or whether you want to undo more stuff around the front chain cover. You can find other videos on YouTube about replacing chains and so on that tell you how to remove all of that stuff. That is it for everything that I have to say beforehand. Yeah, I'll just cut now to the main video. Okay, I'm about to start to convert my 959 to a single-sided swing arm. I've sent a rear wheel off with an 1199 rear wheel, so my wheels are red. My replacement wheel is black, so it was sent off for a colour match. So it does mean that my back wheel is off already, which isn't entirely the order that I meant to do this. My idea was to remove the fairings, then go around breaking all the torques on just about everything, especially things like the rear wheel and the swing arm pivot bolts, the things with high torque settings. Break them all while it's on the ground, but it should be stable on the paddock stand. Yeah, break all, so remove the fairings, break all the torque settings. Then I'm going to lift the whole bike. I've got an axle stand in the back. It's not an axle stand, sorry, an engine hoist in the back. I'm going to lift the entire rear end using the subframe. I have a small bike jack under there that I'll slot underneath the exhausts. It's not going to be load bearing. It's just to make sure there's a bit of a less chance of it sort of wobbling around. It's just for a bit of extra stability. Then drop the rear end off, put the new one on, then I can put it back down on an axle stand, so I'm having the whole thing held up on the rear subframe for as little time as possible. There's no point me filming taking the whole of the fairings and stuff like that off, because that's just boring and trivial. Just know that you're looking at a whole bunch of 3mm, 4mm. No, I think it's just, yeah, maybe, is this one a 4mm? Let me have a look before I go giving you bad information. Where are, oh, there we are. Okay, but skis. Is that one 4mm? No, that one is still small. Is it 3? There's a 2.5 on the inside of the, yeah, that's 3. These are 3. Okay, so everything's 3. I knew there was something. That one, you're 4. So that one is 4. Oh, let's loose. These are all 3. There's one inside here. This one up here. That one is 2.5. And then there's another one down here that's back to 3 again. So everything's 3, 4, 2.5. So I'm going to remove the fairings and then I'll start recording again. There's no point filming that. And it's, I think it's just 3 for the back seat. The seat, yeah, 3 for the passenger seat, for the main seat. And then that obviously just comes off with the key. I promise I'm more organised than this. I have actually gone through, written everything out. I will, there's all the torque settings, and there's my instructions that I've made for myself. I will make all of those public. Yeah, once I've actually done it, in case I need to change everything. It might be, so I've got my GoPro attached to me on my chest. It might be better if I just set it up on a small tripod and leave it in the distance. That might work out better. So the part of this job I'm looking forward to the least is this, messing around in here with the ABS. So you've got the ABS electrical line, the signal, and then you've got the rear brake line that comes through. I think the electrical signal sneaks up into there, and then the actual ABS, the brake line comes into here to the ABS unit, where there is the union in there, and that's the whole bit that I'm looking forward to the least, in terms of not only sort of leaking brake fluid, I've got loads of rags around, but in terms of getting air into the ABS unit. But anyway, that I can deal with at a later date. I'm rambling. Right, I'm going to stop, going to take the fairings off, then I'll come back. Right, I've got the fairings off the bike, upper and lower fairings. I had to take the cockpit fairing out, just because that side was being awkward and didn't want to come out while it was in place. It had to come out for another job that I want to do. I'm going to take the nose cone off, replace the full beam lamps with, it's currently got the Philips Ultravision, like ultra white lights in. I've got some LED ones that will hopefully fit. LEDs easily fit the outside ones down here, but there's much less room inside. Anyway, I digress. So fairings are off. The next step, unbolt the clutch slave from the bike. It should move just enough to allow access to the front sprocket cover. If replacing chains and sprockets, if replacing the chain, it's wise to replace the sprockets at the same time. So yeah, you don't necessarily need to do this step. And again, disconnect the gear change connecting rod at the end towards the front of the bike to get access to the front sprocket cover, then remove the front sprocket cover. So this is all if you're changing the chain on the bike, which I am. Because I'm using a 1299 swing arm, 1299s are 525 and have completely different sprocket gearings. I think they're 1339 and this is 1543 and it's a 520 chain, and I'm sticking with the 959 chains and gearings and everything else. It's just the hardware that I want to change out. So yes, next step is unbolt all the stuff relative to the clutch cover. Sorry, the front sprocket. BRB. So there's not much room, I'm afraid, because of the way the bike is situated. But this is the clutch slave. There are 3 bolts on it that require an Allen wrench, and it's a 5mm Allen wrench. Then this will move just enough to get me access to the gear change linkage, so I can move all of that out of the way, and then I can remove the front sprocket cover. So that's what this nonsense is all about. This is only if you are changing the gearing, the chain and sprockets. Okay, so we have the gear change linkage here. That was another 5mm Allen bolt, and that's got red thread locker on, so it didn't really want to come away terribly easily. I've put some shop towel underneath the clutch slave. There's some oil around there and stuff. There shouldn't be any clutch fluid knocking about. If there is, you've got a bigger problem, but that hopefully is enough to get me access to remove the front sprocket cover, and then I'll crack the front sprocket, which won't be fun because that's loads of torque. Back in a bit. Okay, so this has been the most bullshit part of the job so far, and that's getting the clutch cover itself, sorry, the front sprocket cover. Okay, so this has been the most bullshit part of the job so far, and that's physically getting the front sprocket cover out of the gap down here. In the process, the rubber, it's like a sort of seal on the front of the clutch slave. Is it the slave? Anyway, the clutch cylinder down here, that popped out, so that's going to need to be cleaned thoroughly before putting back. I might need to get a new O-ring for that as well, but otherwise that's now freed. That's clear. I can now get at the front sprocket. Let me see how many mil that is. I'm guessing it's going to be 6 or 8 as I blindly grab for Allen wrenches behind me. Yeah, I don't know, let's go with 8. Yep, that's 8mm. Okay, so I'm going to need an 8mm socket, possibly on a breaker bar. What I might do is put like a screwdriver or one of my Allen wrenches in there, so if it tries to turn, this tries to rotate, this will lock it off and stop it rotating. Otherwise I might use a oops, I shouldn't do that. Yes, that's stupid. Otherwise I might use an impact wrench. That's my least favourite solution. It doesn't matter if I damage the chain or sprocket because they're both coming off. Right, that's next. Okay, I've loosened the front sprocket. I ended up having to use an impact wrench to do so. I tried it on the lowest setting, then I tried it on the next lowest setting. It was the second setting out of 4, and it came away fairly easily. So that is the front sprocket loosened. What I don't know, sorry, I'm trying to weave my way between the bike here, is how much of a fight I'm going to have to remove the front sprocket itself. But ultimately that is a job that kind of gets left until the end, really. I don't need to mess with that. It's just breaking all the torques on the bolts and everything. I think next I need to loosen, so now we're getting down to the actual job. So is the pinch bolts. There's pinch bolts on these rear sets, on the foot pegs basically. There's a pinch bolt here that connects the foot peg to this, and this is the actual swing arm pivot pin. There'll be a massive great Allen wrench that goes in there and undoes. So I need to loosen those, then break these off. I think these are 100 Newton meters, and so do that both sides. And then I need to release it's this side, the suspension linkage. Just loosen that, and that's kind of it. Then I'm going to need to suspend the back of the bike. I need to remove, this is the traction control computer. They're just two 8mm bolts in there, and then that will remove completely. Then I can put some ratchet straps under the rear end, jack up the rear end, support the bike underneath, like I say, underneath the exhausts. No weight on the exhausts, just to make sure the bike can't wobble, to make sure it's stable. Then actually drop the back end of the bike off. So what I will do is once I've loosened these bolts, I'll come back. I have a horrible feeling these might not be easy. It's all going to be famous last words. And then I'll set up the GoPro on a tripod, and you can watch me swear and actually labour at the job itself, and we'll see what happens. Back in a bit. So the pivot pins, they're not particularly tight, but they're bloody awkward to get at because you have so little room in here. They're a 6mm Allen key. You're going to need one that's fairly small, but then obviously you need a fair bit of leverage in order to break the bolt. But like I say, luckily it wasn't overly tight. There seems to be slightly more room on the left hand side, on the clutch side, and then eventually it gets there that you can just loosen it by your fingers. So yep, that's that bit. Next is the actual suspension pivot bolt. Brake caliper where it connects to the swing arm, and the suspension linkage at the back. Right, this is a scary bit. I think you might want to see this, so let's see how it goes. I'll pause this and set the camera up. Okay, so this is a 10mm long, or rather a long 10mm Allen socket or wrench, depending on how you want to look at it. I've got to have a bunch of adapters in here, which isn't going to go well, and we fit that in there, and it's, yeah, down here. Nope, I can feel that, yeah, I had a feeling the weak point is this adapter. I'm going to have to come up with another method, BRB. Okay, fortunately I found an adapter that was single, just one adapter that did the job. Now this is terrifying, I've got to be honest. Oh shit, there we go, it's releasing. I hope, yes it is. Sort of had visions of the pivot pin shearing or something. So yes, that is loose. Now I need to go and do the same on the other side. So that is the actual swing arm pivot pin. Do the same on the other side, then I'll show you the linkage. Okay, so that's both of them done. I did the other side. That one let go a lot more suddenly. So this one let go gradually, and the other side just sort of let go suddenly as a bam. But it wasn't half as stiff as I was expecting it to be. It required a lot less force and effort than I was expecting, which is good. So now we need to come and take a look at the rear suspension linkage. This that looks like, I'm guessing, an 8. Let's have a look. Sorry, quality camera work. I'm so editing this out. Here's an 8. Let's see if it's 8. Okay, so I'm editing some nonsense out. Yes, it's an 8. 8mm wrench here. I don't know how much force this is going to require. I think it's 45 Newton meters, so it should be a lot less than I've just been doing. There we go. So that cracked by hand. Just using this. That is the bolts done. I'm going to need to find somewhere to set up the camera properly. So the next step is remove the traction control module and raise the rear end of the bike. Eek. So I'll dig out my engine hoist. I'm not going to bore you with any of that. Get it all set up and ready to go. Show you how it's set up, and then yeah, I'll hoist it and remove the paddock stand, then we remove the bolts. That's it. The rear end will just come off. I might need to faff with that sprocket after all to get the chain out of the way. Yeah, so that might be a thing. I might just break the chain instead, because that's got to be done at some point. Back in a bit. Okay, so we're set up. I was lucky enough to have an engine hoist. It's taken me a good half an hour or an hour to get this set up. It's a heavy bugger. And then to get the ratchet straps in place. Oh, for heaven's sake. Sorry. Just me trying to put the... There we go. Right, so I've got that underneath just to support the bike, to stop it from wobbling too much. But yeah, not overly happy about that. Luckily I've done all the torquey stuff already. So now I just need to remove the 2 pivot pins and remove the suspension linkage. So suspension linkage first, at which point I would expect the back to potentially drop down, so I'll need to support that. I need to, oh bugger, I didn't break them. I need to remove the brake caliper. Damn, I forgot that. And then the 2 pivot pins, at which point the thing will be free. So I shall bring through the new swing arm so it's ready to go on as quickly as possible. I want this contraption up for as little time as humanly possible. So I'm going to crack on, pause this, find somewhere to set up the camera, and then I'm going to rock on. See, this is what happens when I don't follow my own instructions. So I forgot to check back. I should have released all of the ABS and the brake cables before getting this far. So I think I'm going to have to release them from the swing arm and the caliper and do those afterwards, but I should have done that before. So I'm going to do that quickly, release that brake caliper, and then free the cables from the swing arm itself, so they're attached to the bike but not the swing arm, so I can put this down as quick as I can. Okay, so I've got axle stands underneath the end of the swing arm. I am about to release the rear suspension linkage, and it'll drop 1 centimetre or 2 onto those axle stands, I would expect, and then I'll do the pivot pins. So yeah, I'm going to do this with witnesses. Let's see how it goes. So I broke the torque on the linkage when I was meant to. So right, this is just sliding out without any effort. Okay. So in theory, the rear end is now floating. And it will come away. There it is. This linkage should release. I think it's probably not going to go anywhere unless I let the back drop further, which is probably a good idea, but at least I've got it supported now, and I can release it slowly. So I am releasing the left hand side pivot pin. Not unscrewing any further. Where is it coming out? I'm guessing there's weight of the pivot of the arm. Okay, so I've removed the chain, which I should have done ages ago. All of the issues I've had have been because I haven't followed my own instructions. So So I have been able to loosen the pivot pin on the left hand side, so that is now free. That can go there, and now this is the last thing holding, I believe, I hope. It should be the last thing holding that's the 8, where's the 10? There it is. Holding the swing arm to the bike. So I need to support it so it doesn't fall onto the exhaust. And wow, okay, still going. I think that's it. I think that's it. No, no it's not. That, I think, is it. There we are. So the shiny one was on the left hand side, though they're different diameters as well, so you can't screw up too badly. That is now free. The only thing that isn't coming is the swing arm linkage, the suspension linkage. Everything else is free. The swing arm itself is happy to float around. It's just this linkage doesn't want to let go. There we are. There we go. That is away. And yes, that is lighter. I was going to say that is lighter than the other one, but the other one has the sprocket and stuff on it that this doesn't. So now I'm going to reverse that as quickly as possible. I'm going to clean those bolts and check for grease, and then just get this all back on as quickly as possible, so I'll be right back. I just removed the front sprocket, and cleaning around there has taken longer than every other job put together. Absolutely filthy disgusting, and even then I had to sort of stop because I'm running out of time. So I'm going to chuck some gloves back on. I need to grease up the pivot pins and chuck everything back in. I'm back in a sec. Okay, so I'm going to grease up the pivot pins, the linkage pivot pin and the actual swing arm pivot pins. So this is grease B. I'm sure I'll drop it now that it's covered in grease, so it gets covered in cack. I'll have to start again. Okay, that's the linkage. And the last one. There we go. A little bit on the thread, so we'll clean that off. Right. This is going to be an adventure. Trying to figure out how to get it back together again. So I've cleaned around the back here, cleaned around the sprocket, the front sprocket. Yeah, now I need to figure out how to get it all in one piece. The suspension linkage was the last thing to go actually, so I guess that's going to be the first thing to have to go in, which is annoying because this loves to fall out. Right, there goes. So, comes up here. I had to wiggle it in a bit to get it around. Wiggle it out rather. There we are. No, I think I need to go the other way first. If I go in right hand side first. No, that's not it either. So you can witness me faffing about. Yeah, it does need to go that way. It needs to get underneath the linkage. There we are. Okay. And then on the right hand side. Holy crap, there we go. That's kind of in situ. Let's get the pin in. So, lift this up. No, that's not right. Yeah, it is. Oh, you can watch me grimacing. How much fun is that? Let's try the pin on this side so it's taking some of the weight. Come on, you little bugger. There it is. Ah, crap. Okay. So, there we are. That is in situ. Okay. So that one's in place. Now, where did that go? Isn't it always the way? Something makes a bid for freedom. So I've got the O-ring, which would be the hardest bit to find. Now I just need to find the shiny bit. It should be easy to find. Ah, but is it? Is it heck? This one. Oops. No, that's not. Am I got them the wrong way around? Ah, there we are. There we go. That is in. Holy crap. It's kind of working. Right. Now that needs torquing down. Both of these will need torquing down to 100 Newton meters, but I'm not going to do that until it's off this contraption, where it'd be safer to put some force. So this is nearly done up on this side. Right, that is in. The swing arm is now attached, except for the suspension linkage, and that is waiting for me to find a small washer part of the linkage. I'm going to pause while I dig this out, and I'll come back. Okay, that was easy enough. It was just caught on I don't know, something down the side there. Anyway, there we are. And clean the O-ring again, just to be on the safe side. So this is part of the suspension suspension linkage on. And that's that. Now, this is the one that didn't want to give when I was taking the other one out. So I'm guessing it's not going to want to go back in very easily either. Yeah, it might be a bit easier in hindsight to loosen a bit more of the suspension linkage, some of the other bolts around it, just to make this a little bit easier to move in and out. There we go. There we are. So let's get this bugger up and in the right place. Right. Hopefully this bolt will just pop in, but it's not going to. The odds are against me that it's aligned perfectly. It only needs a fraction of a millimetre to be out, and the bolt won't go in. Sorry, this isn't exactly useful content, is it? But you get to see me struggling. It's so close to it. Come on. It can't be far out. Where are we going? Not there. Oh, come on. It's so nearly in situ. Okay, let's back this off a bit. Okay, so it does have loads of play, it's just not. Right, let's put this down out of the way. Start again. And the linkage just popped out again. There we go. Right, come on. You little sod. Oh, whoever's ringing me can go away. So this is where, if I'd been more prepared and started the job where I'd meant to start the job, moved the bike a bit, I'd be able to access that side and be able to see which way I need to adjust things exactly. Right, I'm going to pause this and edit it because it's just me faffing about trying to line it up, purely because I've set the bike up in a bad place. Well, blow me, that's it. So I managed to get the suspension linkage one home. So both of these are home, and the third one up here is home. None of them are torqued, but nor should they be at this point, until the bike is safe. They're just tight enough that it's not going to fall apart, but everything is secure. And that is the actual swing arm swapped over. So I'm going to need to nip these down. No, I'm not until I've torqued the bolt, silly sod. Right, okay, in which case the next step is to get the bike on the new swing arm. Sorry, the new stand, new paddock stand. And then I can take it down with this contraption. Back in a bit. Okay, it is being held up by the stand, axle stand, not axle stand, paddock stand. Yes. Come away. carefully. There we go. And there's the swing arm. So the next set of jobs is taking care of the brakes. The brakes and ABS line that need to go up the right hand side of the bike. I think that's going to happen tomorrow. But in terms of swapping the swing arm over, that's pretty much done. Hey. So I've started trying to run the ABS cable and the brake line. So what we need to do is remove both of these bolts, and behind here is a third one. So you have to remove the bolt from here. There's an Allen bolt, another Allen bolt from here. There's an Allen bolt behind here, and that creates enough movement here that you can then get to this one. You can just see the silver of the nut behind there. I also had to remove a bolt from there and a bolt from all the way up there, and that removes the ABS cover, which gets me access to this. So I'll be needing to remove this one, and then this runs all the way back along through here. And this is the ABS connector here. So this just, you push this down and it comes out, and then this will pop into the plastic. So you can see there's a popper on there. So this one will swap over. I think the ABS line is going to be the easiest of them. There's a cable tie that needs to be cut and then obviously remade once I've run everything through. In order to access that nut in there are two electrical connectors that slide onto a piece of plastic. This will make sense once you're actually looking at it. So they slide onto this piece here. So they just slide off, and once they slide off you can access that, which is what I'm about to do next. Anything else I need to make note of? No, that's it. That's all I've done so far. So one thing I thought I ought to point out is my job is made a bit harder because I've got this frame slider. You might not have that, in which case it will just be a nut here. There'll be two, well, three the same along the length of this. It's just, yeah, mine, I have a frame slider. That's it. Just wanted to make a note of that. There was one other thing I wanted to make a note of. None of these are tight. You're talking like maybe 10 Newton meters. So when it comes to tightening them back up, torquing them back down, don't go mad. Just be really careful. You don't need to do them up stupidly tightly. Okay, so the job is over. So I figured I'd give you my advice on bleeding the ABS, and it's not the ABS, the rear brake line. Fitting it wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be. You're going to leak some brake fluid. Again, make sure you've got brake cleaner handy, and loads of rags. When you're bleeding, obviously you want to put rags around absolutely everything that you can, and just be overly cautious. You can't be too careful. So the things that would have made my life a lot easier if I'd done them straight away, I lost a lot of time for this because again I wasn't really sort of paying attention to my own instructions. When you've got the rear wheel off and the rear brake caliper down here, take both bolts out, have the rear caliper up this way. I hung it on some cable ties up this way so that the bleed valve is facing upwards. That way obviously the air is rising, it will bleed better. You will need something to place between the brake pads. So push the pads back in, that helps you with bleeding the ABS unit in here. You'll then need something to place between the brake pads for when you start pushing the lever down when you're bleeding the brakes. It gives them something to clamp against so they don't just pop out or leak or anything like that. And push those pads back into the caliper a few times. So there will be some air in the top of the ABS unit here, and pushing air back through the unit just helps to sort of bleed that through a bit better. I found it did help. I did it 3 or 4 times, just sort of pushing the pads back out, and then obviously when you put the something the size of a rotor back between the pads again, as you push this they come back out again, and you've got something to sort of it helps bleed the system through better. Basically, I'm rambling again, sorry. That's really it for the sort of advice on that. Is it was just yeah, make sure you tip up the caliper, have something to place between the pads, push the pads back in a few times. It helps with bleeding this. I didn't mess with the ABS unit other than bolting on the banjo bolt off and on. It's going to get a bit leaky, be prepared to clean up really quickly. And it was pretty easy. I had to bleed my clutch as well. Again, pretty easy. It's just standard bleeding, bleeding a line. There's 100 videos on YouTube that will tell you how to bleed brakes and clutches. Yeah, that's it. That's the job. It's pretty simple. If I'd stuck to my own instructions, it would have been quicker. I should have broken the chain earlier on. I ended up having to do it while it was already suspended in the air. It's a pretty easy job. If I'd followed my own instructions, I would have had an easier time. It wasn't difficult as it was. The things that took the most time were cleaning out the front sprocket area. It was disgusting and filthy. It just took forever to clean. Bleeding the brakes took forever because I hadn't moved the caliper, forgot to move the caliper up. That would have made my life so much easier. Placing the lines took a little while, but it wasn't particularly difficult. Doing the job itself, you saw it. It's not that difficult. It was just a bit of a challenge trying to get the linkage back in, but it's a pretty easy job. You've got this.